What's up, Dirt Junkies? Let's talk about socks. This one is $18 a pair, and this one is $7 a pair, and they feel the same on the trails. Taking care of your feet on the trail is critical. There is definitely no arguing about that, which is probably why so many people are willing to spend $18 or more on one pair of socks. But I've been using these darn cheap socks at $7 a pair for more than a year, and I think they're just as good as these darn tough socks. Let me tell you why. For the last month, I've been using several trail sessions, hiking or trail running, to compare these darn tough socks to what I'll call these darn cheap socks. I've been wearing a darn tough sock on one foot and then a darn cheap sock on the other foot to see if I could tell the difference while I was out on the trail. But before I get to my specific experiences of wearing one sock on each foot, let's make sure these socks are even worth comparing. Let's talk about the materials, the weight, and the cushioning of each socks to make sure we're not comparing apples to oranges. First, let's talk about the materials that each sock is made out of. The darn tough sock is 53% nylon, 43% merino wool, and 4% lycra spandex. The darn cheap sock, made by a company called Tree, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly or not, is made of 40% nylon, 45% merino wool, 8% polyester, and 7% spandex. But what that means is both of these socks are essentially made of the same materials, either 43 or 45% merino wool, and the rest a mix of synthetic fabrics. So these socks are very similar in the materials that they're made of. I will say that personally, merino wool is my fabric of choice when it comes to socks because I think it's versatile enough to be used both in the summer and well into the fall or early spring seasons. It's cool enough in the summer, but keeps your feet warm in the fall and spring. So I really like merino wool. And then mixing in those synthetic fabrics gives it a nice stretch and a nice tight fit when you put them on your feet. So I really like the fabric mix in both of these socks. As I said, they're very similar. Next, it's important to note that both of these socks are quarter length, so there's not going to be any difference in my experience that way. And lastly, for comparing them, let's talk about the weight and the cushioning. Both are termed as lightweight merino wool socks. The cushioning on them is also very similar. I will say it does feel like the darn tough sock has slightly more cushioning, but it could just be because I've had these socks for over a year now. They feel very similar after you get them on your foot. With all that said, it means that these socks are extremely similar and are worth comparing to see if the darn tough socks are worth the additional cost over the darn cheap socks. So we've established that these socks are pretty much the same. So let's talk about whether my feet could tell the difference between socks that are $18 a pair and socks that are $7 a pair. As I said, I've been using my trail sessions for the last month to put a darn tough sock on one foot and a darn cheap sock on another foot, which was really hard for my OCD brain, and to be honest, I thought that there's no way that the experiment would work because I would just remember which foot was wearing which sock. But I'll tell you, shortly into my trail session, I could not remember which sock was on which foot. I just can't remember which one I put on which foot. Short-term memory loss for the win. We did think about running the experiments as a blind study, meaning that I'd be blindfolded, my wife would put one sock on one foot and the other sock on the other foot, and then I'd try trail running or hiking still blindfolded so I couldn't cheat and see. That didn't seem very safe, and we figured we could have the same effect given my short-term memory issues. I have worn my mismatched darn tough and darn cheap socks on trail runs ranging from 3 to 6 miles and on hikes ranging from 3 to 10 miles. And as soon as I start hiking or running, I honestly cannot tell the difference in how my feet are feeling in the darn tough sock versus the darn cheap sock. And they really feel the same. In fact, even this morning I was on a trail run and I thought, oh, my left one is more comfortable. That must be the darn tough sock. But by the end of my run, I looked down and sure enough, that was the darn cheap sock. Now, I'm not saying that the darn cheap sock is more comfortable or better than the darn tough sock. I'm just sharing that with you to make the point that I couldn't remember which sock was on which foot, and so there was no bias. I made a point to try out these different socks before my big Grand Canyon rim-to-rim day hike. I wanted to make sure that my feet were going to be happy on that long day. What I decided was that I couldn't tell the difference between the darn tough sock and the darn cheap sock, as I said already. So I really wanted to put these darn cheap socks to the test, and this is what I wore on my 27-mile rim-to-rim day hike. They performed perfectly. I will say that I did get one blister on my fourth toe. That one right there. but it's only because I have weird toes where that one slides under the other one, and the same thing has actually happened with my Darn Tough socks. So it's not the sock's fault, it just happens because my feet are weird, one toe goes under the other. Other than that one blister, these socks were amazingly comfortable, nice and warm in the morning when it was about 40 degrees when we started, and nice and cool in the afternoon when it got really hot on the way out of the canyon. These socks were awesome. I should also say that I wore these socks on my 37-mile birthday run/hike, and they were great during that super long trail session as well. So I don't think you're giving up anything by going with these darn cheap socks over the Darn Tough socks. But none of this means a darned thing if the darn cheap socks won't last longer than a few hikes. I think one reason why so many people go for the Darn Tough socks is because of their lifetime warranty. On their website, it says that if you wear a hole in them, they will replace them free of charge for life. That is an awesome guarantee, and honestly something that attracts me to these Darn Tough socks as well. In a moment of vulnerability, let me just admit that my feet are not easy on socks. I have this very large big toe with the nail that seems intent on ripping a hole in every single left sock that I wear. And that's honestly how most of my socks meet their demise. The left big toenail rips a hole right through the top. So I love the idea of a sock with a lifetime warranty. So when the big toe strikes, I can get a new pair. But that has not happen with these darn cheap socks, and I have worn these on a ton of different activities for a ton of miles, and there is no hole in them on the left big toe or anywhere else, and they're still just as tight and comfortable as the day that I bought them. So the lifetime warranty is nice, but potentially not worth it if you can get 3 pairs of socks for almost the same price. I can hear you guys through the screen already, but Jeff, if I pay $18, I have socks for life. Maybe, but you have 1 pair of socks for life. If you only go hiking occasionally and your feet are really tough on socks, this might be the way to go. You pay $18, you've got 1 pair of socks for the rest of your life, no matter what happens. But if you're like me and hit the trails several times a week, having 3 or 4 pairs of socks is really nice. I don't like doing laundry. I like having a lot of different pairs of socks that I can grab and depend on the trails, rather than just 1 pair of socks that I have to worry whether or not they're clean, washed, dried, whatever. But tell me what you guys think. Would you ever consider the darn cheap socks over the darn tough socks? Maybe you're an expensive sock wearer for life, and that's okay. I just wanted to let you know that what I found is the darn cheap socks seem to be just as good, just as comfortable, and just as durable as these darn tough socks. I'll put links in the description below where you can get both of these socks, the darn cheap as well as the darn tough. And as I was getting the links, I realized that for some reason these aren't currently available, even though they were just a short time ago, but they have a very similar sock that I'll put a link to as well. There's more merino wool in the version that's currently available, but other than that, they're exactly the same. And honestly, I think more merino wool makes for a potentially better sock anyway. To sum it up, I think darn cheap is just as good as darn tough, and I get more pairs of socks. Life is better with some dirt in it. My mutant second toe, is that your second toe or is that your 4th toe? 4th.